when I think back to what was going on in 2017, 2018, even 2014, 15, 16, like really the last decade, I think of a lot of people who were concerned about rising home prices and whether or not they should purchase a house with prices going the direction that they were going. And let's face it, like that's a legitimate concern, especially, with a decade ago where the recession was fresh and we were just coming out of it. The reality is if you bought your house 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, for a lot of people, even 1 year ago, chances are you have built up a significant amount of equity and have done very, very well for yourself. In fact, we actually have a client who bought a house last year, 2021, realized that it wasn't the location that they wanted to be in, and turned around and sold it this year for a really nice profit. So my point being is that your equity is probably a lot better than what you think it is. Hey everybody, Jeff Minter here, team lead of the Minter team at Realty Executives Cooper Spransey. Let's take a look at some of the things influencing our national housing market. First thing that we need to address is the monkey in the room, elephant in the room, monkey on the table, whatever the saying is. Let's talk about prices, right? Prices going up, and that's scaring everybody. That's creating that bubble word or that crash word. And the reality is the data really doesn't support that likelihood. Let's look into this appreciation and see what's really going on. Right here we have a graph from CoreLogic, and it shows the appreciation year over year by month, going back to January 2021 when we saw 10%. And if we take a look at this graph, what you're going to see is that appreciation is continuing to rise. So I think one of the first things that we need to look at if we're talking about that bubble word or that crash word is we need to see it change or shift in that trend of what's happening with appreciation. If appreciation's continuing to go up, we're continuing to gain more and more equity. For things to crash or burst like it did the last time, which is the statement so many people are making, we need to end up with people underwater. And so until appreciation shifts, I think some of those concerns are a little bit off the table. Not that it's not going to change market dynamics, but that, as far as crashing and losing all the value in your house, I think that really has to be off the table for right now. Yeah, despite stats like this, Realtor.com states that 77% of people still believe we're in a housing bubble. So let's look at 3 variants that are much different from the last time. And number 1 is lending. Not only have lending restrictions gotten much tighter since 15 years ago, when there were really low or no down payment loans, adjustable rate mortgages with huge swings in the interest rate, or people qualifying for loans that quite frankly should not have been qualifying for mortgages in the first place. With all those things happening, what happened were people getting into houses that they could not afford or could no longer afford because they shouldn't have been able to pay for them in the first place. And when prices changed and when prices shifted, they were underwater because they didn't have enough built-in equity. So today, lending restrictions are tighter and buyers are more qualified. In fact, credit score for the typical buyer is 42 points higher than it was in the 2000s. What's that decade called between 2000 and 2010? That decade, right? So we are up 42 points and credit points for the average home buyer compared to that decade prior to the crash. And not only that, but equity. That's number 2. Buyers today have much more equity in their house. In fact, according to Forbes, the typical homeowner has $150,000 in equity in their house, and that is apparently the highest number ever. But I think the bigger change with equity is that in today's market with the competition, it's unfortunate in a sense, but in the other sense, it's really difficult to get in with low down payment amount. And so most of the home buyers that are actually winning in today's competition have 20% down or at least 10% down. So they're getting in with built-in equity, which means if the market were to shift, prices were to stagnate, or prices were to even drop a little bit, we have to have people losing 10 to 20% in value in order to get underwater with their mortgage. And while that's happened in other parts of our country, that hasn't been something that's happened here in Madison. Finally, the most basic element of why we have a long ways to go until anything changes is supply and demand. This is the most basic, simplistic piece of any economics and market discussion. Until we close the gap on the amount of available houses, meeting the demand of houses that are needed, it's going to be really difficult to see a shift. What's happened over the last 15 years is, number one, building has not caught up to the pace of pre-2008 levels, which means we don't have that influx of new construction, spec homes, and starter home styles. It exists in a sense, but not at the same level it was 15, 20 years ago. In fact, the price of materials, the price of land, a number of things have played into that impact. And quite frankly, a lot of builders are just building higher end homes. Likewise, the sale of existing homes, not the sales like the numbers of actual closings, but the number of new listings and available existing homes on the market continues to remain at all-time lows. So until we start getting new construction that's a little bit more affordable, or we start getting more existing homes on the market to increase that supply, we're going to have a shortage. And when you have a shortage, what do you have? You have rising prices. So we have to close that gap before we start talking about a bubble bursting. And with all the uncertainty out there and news stories and, trolls and experts on the internet, it can be really hard to decipher what's actually happening. But I got to tell you, that's one of the reasons why I absolutely love my team. See, for those of you that don't know who I am, I used to be a teacher, and that heart of a teacher is something that's gone through our team and our philosophy, and it affects all of our conversations with our clients. So if you're trying to decipher what's going on and what's really happening in the market and what's the right decision for you, and you want to hear it straight up in your best interest, give my team a call. We would love to serve you along your journey. You can get in touch with us at theminterteam.com/contact or message us here on social. And for more real estate tips, tricks, market updates, and new listings, make sure you follow us on social media. Once again, I'm Jeff. Let's connect soon.